hell is that woman? My husband was taken to the hospital after an accident on the way to a trip. Our daughter was supposed to have been in the car with him, but it was not our daughter who was taken to the hospital, but a woman I didn't recognize at all. It turned out my husband was having an affair. When I confronted him with official evidence supporting this fact, not only did he deny that he was doing anything of the sort, but he called me a psycho and treated me like one because I'd gone out of my way to hire a detective agency to justify my suspicions. One way or another, his objections to any adultery notwithstanding. He wouldn't even discuss it with me, and that made things all the more difficult and stupid. He really had the audacity to think he could get away with it. Little did he know that I knew the whole truth that he was hiding from me. I tell him the truth who has a relaxed expression on his face, and things begin to change for the better for me. This is the story of how my husband neglected his daughter as he engaged in adultery with another woman, and how his childish behavior of refusing to live up to his responsibilities eventually drove him into the darkest place he will ever experience. My name is Abby. I'm 38 years old and I work for an architectural design company. My husband, Landon, is 35, and he works for a real estate company. We were introduced through a mutual colleague at work, and although he is 3 years younger, I fell in love with him because of how sweet he was to me. He downright spoiled me with attention and affection, but he wasn't one of those needy, super nice guys. He also showed displays of masculinity and stubbornness, and it was this perfect balance between caring gentleman and fair leader that caused me to fall for him. After 2 years of dating, we got married, and this year marks our 10-year anniversary. In those 10 years, we were blessed with a daughter, Sadie, who has grown up to be a cheerful, bright girl. She supported us as we work hard at our jobs, saying, "My mommy and daddy are both so cool." The sad truth is that we both came home late at night because of our jobs. In other words, we didn't have much time to see each other, and I wouldn't be surprised if that made her a little sad. Landon used to be able to come home earlier in the evening, but now that his department had changed its policy, he started coming home just before the date passed into tomorrow. His sister Jacqueline and her husband usually take care of Sadie because I can't come home until around dinner time. I still feel so bad for her because of this. I would have loved to spend more time with my family, with Sadie especially, but the situation with my job was so cruel as to prevent me from realizing that wish. Not only did Landon start coming home late after a change of policy in his department at work, but more recently he had been out drinking with colleagues and sometimes didn't get home until late at night. On the worst of occasions, he came home early in the morning, around 6 o'clock, which made me pretty angry. Who knows where he could have gone during all that time and what he could have been doing, but his response to my outburst was,
"I missed the last train because a junior colleague of mine got pretty drunk and fell ill and I was nursing him. I did leave you a message, didn't I?"
He did leave me a message, indeed, but that doesn't mean I approved of his coming home so late. I was appalled that even after 10 years of being married to me and having a daughter, that he was still unaware that she had a family. But I couldn't say anything because Landon was fulfilling his duties as a father by making enough money to support the family and taking good care of Sadie on his days off. Then one day, Landon was at home on his day off when I came back and suggested that we go on a trip to celebrate Sadie's 9th birthday. Landon was usually off on Wednesdays and I was off on Saturdays. Since our days off rarely overlapped, we had to decide in advance which of us would take paid leave when we wanted to go on a trip like this. Since he had taken some paid time off to take Sadie to my parents' house during the New Year last year, it was my turn. I applied for some paid time off to book a trip to a nice little hot spring resort, but to my surprise, a huge problem at work arose right before the trip, and I was called to the office on very short notice. I tried to negotiate with my boss, and although they were very apologetic, they were extremely clear that they needed me, mostly because the problem involved numbers, and I can confidently say I'm pretty much a savant when it comes to numbers. There was nothing I could do to back away from this, so I tragically had to cancel the trip. Sadie was devastated, and I wanted to make it up to her. "Let's go to the theme park that you wanted to go to, Sadie. Let's go overnight. We'll definitely go this time." "Really? You promise?" "I promise, sweetheart, and I'm going to keep it, okay?" "Okay, Mommy. A pinky promise. Next time, don't break it, okay?" I crossed my fingers with Sadie and promised her that I would give the best trip of her life, and she finally showed me that beautiful smile of hers. Landon had gone to a lot of trouble to plan this trip, and to make matters worse, if we had to cancel, we would have to pay assorted cancellation fees. It would be a waste of money, and he had taken time off work for this trip. So I decided to let Sadie still go on the trip with her daddy if they both wanted to.
"Are you sure you want to do this?"
You're the one who planned this whole thing, honey. You and Sadie should get some quality father-daughter every once in a while, right? Oh, and don't forget to bring back souvenirs. I sent Sadie and Landon off with a smile and went straight to work. I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss them, but as long as Sadie and my husband were having fun, that was all that mattered. That's what I thought at the time, and I immersed myself in my work. In the afternoon, when I was almost done with the problems at work, I received a call on my cell phone. I looked at the screen to see who it could be. A suspicious number I had never seen before was displayed. I answered it, and an unfamiliar masculine voice spoke into my ear.
Is this the number of one Mrs. Abigail Chamberlain?
Yes, it is. Abigail speaking.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is Dr. Michael Everett from the Blue Cross Hospital. I regret to inform you that your husband was in a vehicular accident.
The call was from the Blue Cross Hospital telling me that my husband had been in an accident and was being transported to the hospital right as we spoke. Sadie must have been in the car with him, and both of them were being rushed to the hospital. I panicked so much once I heard this news, but I had to stay calm and take appropriate action. I started by telling my boss about the situation and asked them to let me leave early, which they immediately accepted. There was still work to be done, but the most difficult part had been dealt with that morning, and they could take it from there. I next had to rush to the hospital, but my workplace was pretty far from the Blue Cross, and it would take about an hour to get there. I wanted to know if Landon and Sadie were safe as soon as possible. With a sense of urgency, I called my mother-in-law, Cynthia. "Oh, Abby, darling, what a nice surprise. Anything wrong?" "I'm afraid so, Cynthia. I just got a call from the Blue Cross Hospital. Landon and Sadie are in the ER because of an accident." I explained the situation and told my mother-in-law that it would take some time for me to get to the hospital. So I asked her to let me know how Sadie and her son were doing and quickly hopped onto the train. Cynthia happily obliged, and half an hour later, she called me back. I picked up the phone in a panic with the overwhelming fear that the worst had happened, nearly making me faint on the spot. But instead of depression or joy, the expression that I heard in Cynthia's tone of voice was confusion. "Who the hell is that woman, Abby, dear? She says she's an acquaintance of yours." It took me a good few seconds to understand what she said. "What? Cynthia, where's my daughter? Was Sadie not in the car?" "It looks like she wasn't, honey. I called Jacqueline earlier, and she said that Sadie was staying with her today. Sadie is safe." I was relieved to hear that my daughter was safe and sound, but that didn't mean I could stay calm. When I finally arrived at the hospital, I quickly went to my husband's room and demanded, "Who is that woman? Why was she in the car?" I interrogated him, but he didn't show any remorse and just said that he didn't know her. Cynthia, his mother, also questioned him with a harsher tone, and it was pretty much like a good cop, bad cop situation. But he merely repeated she was an acquaintance of mine, and she needed a ride to the train station fast, so he let her hop on, blah, blah, blah. He just kept making up excuses why he had an accident.
I really thought she was an acquaintance of Abby's, but I guess I was deceived because you clearly don't recognize her. I really have no idea who the hell she is, and I really don't know how she knew me. But more to the freaking point, I've just been in a car accident, and nobody seems to care about me and how I feel. What's up with that?
Landon just kept his mouth agape and moving, trying pretty hard to deprive us of an opportunity to talk, and to deflect the conversation away from the subject of the woman. I was so angry with him that I couldn't help but lash out. "Then why the frick did you leave Sadie with your sister Jacqueline? You were supposed to be on a trip today, weren't you?"
I canceled it because I thought it wouldn't be much of a family trip without you, Abby. I wanted to go for a drive, too, and have some alone time. Even I need some of that from time to time, you know? So I asked Jacqueline to take Sadie with her while I was gone. Then that woman who said she's an acquaintance of Abby's asked for a ride to the train station fast, and she seemed to be in genuine trouble, so I gave her a ride.
Landon kept repeating the same stupid points, and it was completely out of line. "You must have been cheating on your lovely wife when you left your daughter alone and gave that other woman a ride, eh? I bet my soul that that's what you were doing, exactly like your dastardly father." Even Cynthia became angry at her son's attitude and interrogated him severely, but he sighed in annoyance and said,
"Do you know what, Mom? What proof do you have that I had an affair? That's just a fantasy. And I've been injured in an accident, and I'm not in a good state at all. And if that's the way you want to play this nice visit of yours, just get the hell home, please. If you persist, I'll call the nurse to escort you out, all right?"
Landon had become the coldest man I'd ever seen, and it made me wonder if he was really an adult. I had so many more things to say, questions to ask, but if I stayed any longer, I really was going to be kicked out, since nurses had that authority. So Cynthia and I reluctantly left the room. If we couldn't get Landon to talk, I thought we could talk to the woman who had been taken to the hospital as well, but that went even worse, if that was even possible. Who are these people? I don't know them. I'm scared. Somebody please help me. As soon as she saw our faces, she started screaming and hit the nurse's call repeatedly without giving us an opportunity to ask her any questions. We felt that the shrieking banshee would disturb others, and we couldn't even speak a word to her, let alone get her to listen to what we had to say. We had no choice but to leave the room. I couldn't believe my husband's attitude, but we left the hospital anyway since business was futile at the moment. And after a brief conversation with Cynthia, I went to pick up Sadie from Jacqueline's flat. Fortunately, my daughter was safe and sound, and the doctor must have told her about her daddy, because as soon as I walked in through the front door, she showered me with questions. Is Daddy okay? Is he hurt? Can he come home? Your daddy's fine, sweetie. He's just a little banged up and a bit tired. The doctor said he had to stay a few weeks in the hospital, but he'll be back soon. I saw the look on her face as she cried and worried about her father. My husband, Landon Chamberlain, is the father of my child, and he was the most important person in her life. I was so shocked and angry that he really could be suspected of foul play. But it's certainly unreasonable to suspect infidelity without any evidence at this point. I didn't have time to do a background check on Landon's life for the past year or so myself. So I decided to hire a professional. Fortunately, Cynthia also suspected her son's infidelity, and she was happily cooperative in sparing some money to pay for the investigation. I'm afraid this is all I can do, but I still am so sorry about my son and his potentially scandalous actions. For darling Sadie's sake, let's settle this once and for all. It was a relief to hear her say that. While waiting for the results of the investigation by the detective agency to pour in, I was left alone with Sadie for a few days. She was so happy during these days and said, "You listen to me so well, Mommy, and your cooking is always so awesome." Something about the way she said, "You listen to me so well, Mommy," gave me a bad feeling in my stomach. Even though it was her daddy that usually took care of her, I took a small risk and asked her, "Don't you think it's Daddy that usually listens to you?" The moment I asked her that, Sadie's expression suddenly went dark and grave. She answered with, "Don't tell Daddy what I'm going to tell you, okay?" Then she began to tell me the truth about her father. Sadie told me that he never took care of her when I wasn't around, and that he was always on the phone talking to someone else. Whenever he wasn't on the phone, he treated her rather terribly, making her eat only frozen meals for dinner and going out himself, leaving her alone in a rather large house. Oh, honey, why didn't you tell me that Daddy was being mean to you? Because if I told you, Mommy, he'd get really mad at me. And I also pinky promised Daddy never to tell you. Please don't get mad at him. She said this with a very pained look on her face, as though she was the one doing something wrong here. To Sadie, to tell her mother about all these terrible things her daddy was doing to her, the mental strain must have been quite heavy and exhausting. Seeing Sadie like that made me explode with anger. I felt ashamed of the fact that Mr. Chamberlain had taken advantage of his own daughter's conscience and neglected her just to go off gallivanting with another woman. I hated myself with a burning passion because of my own obliviousness. I'd never known she was having such a hard time. I'm so sorry, Sadie. Dear, Mommy's here now, and I won't make you feel lonely anymore. As I held a smiling Sadie in my arms, I vowed to do anything to avenge her and the hard times she had to endure. And I was going to make that bastard pay for what he did to my little girl. A few days later, I got the results back from the detective agency, and sure enough, Mr. Chamberlain really was having an affair. It seems that the other woman was someone who worked for the same office as him, but what surprised me the most was that the affair had been going on for more than a year. This period of time coincided with the time when his department had changed policy, and he started coming home late. I thought of something that very well could be possible, so I checked with his company and found that his department had not changed policy at all, and that he was still able to come home in the early evening. In other words, the only reason he didn't come home until late at night was because he was meeting with the adulteress during that time. According to Sadie's story, every time I came home late, he left Sadie alone and went out with this other woman on his own. I don't need a husband who puts other women higher on his list of priorities than his daughter. With the evidence in hand, I went to see the bastard in the hospital. I called Cynthia in advance and told her everything, and she came with me. Remember when she had said something like, "exactly like your dastardly father"? Well, she said that because she had been divorced from her husband when he was 18 years old, after he had had an affair with another woman himself. Cynthia, who knew better than most the sorrow of being cheated on, was so sad and so furious that her son had done the same thing to his own wife that upon going inside the hospital room, she lunged forward and tried to punch her son. I tried my darndest to stop her, but she was screaming in anger. Relieved that the room was completely private and had no other patients inside, I dragged the monstrous Cynthia outside the room and calmed her down. I reminded her that she was in a hospital room and she shouldn't disturb any of the other patients next door and down the hallway.
What the hell was even that? Damn.
I want a divorce. I have proof of your infidelity.
Huh? I told you time and time again, I didn't have an affair. You still doubt me even after all of my assurances?
Mr. Chamberlain consistently insisted that he hadn't committed adultery, and although I showed him the very real proof that he was, he adamantly claimed it was all forged.
Look, I admit, I did something to make you suspicious, and that's all on me. But to purposefully falsify evidence just because I did something is it's insidious. It's just crazy. And what the hell are you trying to accomplish by dragging my mother into this,
So in a nutshell, not only did he deny that he was doing anything adulterous, but he called me a psycho and treated me like one because I'd gone out of my way to hire a detective agency to justify one way or another my suspicions of an affair, his objections notwithstanding. He was not going to confess to having an affair, no matter what I did. But I had another trick up my sleeve. Well, looks like I really can't do anything about it, and I understand. You're not going to admit to having any affair, even with all this evidence against you. You still claim it's false and emphasize your innocence. With that in mind, I can't divorce you, or rather, not on these grounds, but I can still divorce you on the grounds of child negligence. If you won't admit to the affair, that's fine, because I'll go through my lawyer and demand alimony on these new grounds that you neglected my daughter. That's fine, right? Because you're so innocent. Even if he denied the evidence, there's no explanation for what Sadie said. Even if he hadn't committed adultery, it doesn't change the fact that he abandoned our child on multiple occasions. I proceeded to confront him with the divorce papers, but his evident panic notwithstanding, he would still refuse to write down anything at all, let alone his signature. Seeing him in this pathetic state, Cynthia could no longer contain her anger. She slammed the table in front of him with great force. I don't remember raising you like this! You are an unfit parent for giving my granddaughter such a hard time!
Even you're taking Abby's side, Mom?
Sides? What the frick are you talking about now? If you hadn't caused the accident, you were planning to go on a trip with that woman whom you claim you don't know, right? Jacqueline told me that when you asked to leave Sadie with her. You said, both Abby and I are going on business trips, and used that as an excuse to leave her out of your adultery. How do you even explain this discrepancy? New information popping up left, right, and center for real. So apparently my husband was planning to lie to his own sister and leave Sadie with her and her husband so that they could go on a trip by themselves. I was beyond disgusted with him by this point. I couldn't even look at him as a man any longer. He thought Sadie wouldn't blab about it behind his back because she had a good conscience and kept her promises. But he was way too confident. I'm ashamed of myself for not realizing for 10 whole years that he was such an idiot. If you're not going to divorce me, we'll take this case to court. So, what'll it be, eh? I gave him one last push, and he glared at me, his mouth agape.
I only brought my friend because I thought it would be a waste of time if we had to cancel anyway. And now you're all over me and belittling me like this? I'm Sadie's father, for frick's sake. You're trying to steal me away from her. Is that what you really want from her?
He tried to tear me down this time, so I told him once and for all. You were never a father to Sadie, you bastard. If you were willing to abandon her with your sister because you just wanted some stupid fun as an adult, you're nothing but a source of pain in Sadie's life. Get lost. I told him on the spot that he was no longer welcome in Sadie's life. Perhaps he realized that no matter how hard he'd try, there was no way he could win this argument, and he reluctantly signed the divorce documents, evidently thinking it would be a worse idea to go to court. However, he was still saying that he didn't want to pay alimony and child support, and even under these circumstances, he was being even more selfish than ever. And that sent Cynthia's beautiful fist flying. Abby, my dear, we'll settle the alimony here. I will personally pay for it. What? But I'll make sure my stupid son pays up, so don't worry about it. I always find a way to get him to listen to me in the end, and I tell you, this is no exception. She promised me that, and then made her son sign a contract that officially bound him to paying her back for the debt he owed her. After that, I filed the divorce documents and was able to get a divorce without a hitch. Telling Sadie after the whole thing that her daddy was not coming back was among the hardest things I have ever had to do. But there was no way I couldn't tell her what had happened. So, Sadie, Daddy won't be home again, darling. I'm so sorry, but he did some bad things, and I thought saying goodbye to him was the best thing to do. But if you want to see him, you can, so don't worry. I know you're going to miss him, but I won't make you sad and lonely anymore. And I'll be here for you, always. You will? Pinky promise? Yes, honey, pinky promise. She finally showed me that beautiful smile of hers when our fingers crossed. A few months passed, and due to injuries that were difficult to heal, Mr. Chamberlain and the adulterous woman had to take time off work at the same time. This piqued the curiosity of the company's elite, who thought it strange that they had an accident at exactly the same time, and rumors of an affair were already circulating. Mr. Chamberlain and the adulteress are scheduled to be summoned before the vice president immediately upon their return to work, and they were told that they will be transferred to separate remote branches of the enterprise. The adulteress had repeatedly ignored my demands for alimony, so when I told her that I would file a lawsuit through my lawyer, she readily paid me in full. Mr. Chamberlain has a monthly child support bill from me, but there's no way he can pay it, not with his widow side job, and his mother refused to cover it for him, so he had no choice but to go into debt. I, on the other hand, have alimony, and the company was very considerate of me because they knew about the whole incident surrounding the accident. I'm now enjoying a happy time with my daughter, and I'm keeping the promise I made to Sadie by staying a few nights over at a nice amusement resort.
Look, Mommy! Look! That character is so cute!
Sadie is having the time of her life at the theme park. Seeing her beautiful smile, I made up my mind to stay together with her so that she could continue to spend her whole life with a smile on her face.